there's a great need in a lot of places for people who are stupid enough to go there. And I promise you, if any editor is watching, I am stupid enough to go there. You name the place, I will go there.
Hello and welcome to Here in LA, Pico-Union edition. Today we talk to Sean Beckner-Carmitchel, aka A Cat with News. Sean is a citizen journalist, an activist, and a wine sommelier. What? Yes, indeed. He has worked in some of the swankiest restaurants and hotels in town, and alongside some very famous chefs. Then, on the side, he goes out into the mean streets of LA and documents protests and the sometimes shocking things that go down there. You may have seen him get arrested while on crutches alongside William Film the Police. Well, Sean was the one filming Mr. Film the Police. We will talk about the cops, the protesters, the city hall, cats, and even the nuances of the Santa Barbara and downtown LA wineries. We will? We will. So let's welcome A Cat with News. Hey everybody, I'm here with Sean Beckner-Carmitchel.
That is the one.
How do you say it?
Sean Beckner-Carmitchel.
I love people with hyphens.
Thank you.
Because there's always a story. Mm-hmm. What's yours?
Well, as far as I can tell, Beckner-Carmitchel is Gaelic for my folks don't get along too well. I'm not a big fan of going on Ancestry.com. Maybe it's because of the nature of what I do, but I'm always a little wary of looking into family backgrounds too hard. It always feels a little weird to me. But the family story is that a few of the Carmichaels got on a boat. One of the Carmichaels became pregnant on that boat.
Oh.
And were told that they were no longer a Carmichael, and on Ellis Island changed it to Carmitchel. Whether or not that's true, I have absolutely no idea.
I know so little about you.
Okay.
Outside of the few times that I've seen you on Twitter and the few articles I've read of yours, you're an excellent journalist.
Thank you.
Very, very good on Twitter too, which is not easy to do. And I think a lot of people probably know you from going to these protests and shining a light. Let's start with this. You were the subject in the LA Times when you got arrested for shooting video at a Black Lives Matter event. And they called you an activist. And it struck me because in a way, the story was you can't arrest journalists during a thing. But in that story, they call you an activist, which I would think devalues your standing as a journalist. What's your take?
Well, I want to be clear. I don't think activism or journalism necessarily are different things. I would say that what I've always viewed it as when I started kind of getting into the journalism world, one of the things that's really crazy is I got in at probably the easiest possible time to make mistakes as far as tone goes. And also, I come from the activist world. I don't, make any secrets about that. And I sort of gradually shifted into hard journalism, soft journalism, whatever you want to call it. I will say this: I don't like picking a fight with the LA Times. I have some friends that work there. I have some people that I respect that work there, and there's also some people there that I think do a really bad job. And I think some of those people, perhaps maybe have an outsized influence on sometimes the writing there, but. Look, I don't run the LA Times. I don't think anyone would want to read the LA Times if I ran it.
Because what would you do in it?
What would I do if I were the LA Times? Well, first of all, I'd hire back all of the editors and photographers, especially the photographers that speak Spanish. I think that's...
Because for those who don't know, they haven't been fired just yet. As of this recording, what is this, the 12th of June, 13th of June.
That sounds about right.
Something like that. There was a, they're going to get rid of 74 people. And 2 of them are Spanish-speaking photojournalists. I heard that when somebody heard about this, they decided to resign, therefore leaving one space open, which one of the Spanish photographers is going to retake. But I think your point is that a lot of these editors and web producers, especially young people, are a little shocked and pissed off because they're like the lowest paying people there who are doing a whole bunch of work on the website. And I'm sure when they were recruited, they were told this is a digital first organization.
Yeah,
well, people.
Obviously, I'm not part of the LA Times union. I don't work for the LA Times, despite some people screaming at me's opinion. But one thing I will say is there is one problem that I see, and a few people have kind of been picking up on it, and one really big problem, which is the LA Times has always had a diversity problem. I mean, even the LA Times will admit that. Mm-hmm. And they had made, depending on your opinion, either real and genuine efforts or token efforts. I'm not in that newsroom. I can't speak to that. But when you have a very bad diversity problem and you are getting slowly, you're hiring people with more diversity, and then your contract specifically states that layoffs need to be done in order of seniority, well, that sounds like a recipe for going back to the same diversity problem that existed before. So I hope they figure it out. And
that clause you're talking about, I'm not familiar with it, mm-hmm. is saying that the more experience you have, the less likelihood your expulsion is going to be?
That was what I read in the and it was very funny to read the LA Times article on the LA Times layoffs.
Yeah.
Which has
got to be tough. I think that was Meg James who had to write that.
I think it was Meg James. Yeah. I can't even imagine how difficult it is mm-hmm. not to, especially, I think people forget with journalists, there's an important thing, which is being fair, mm-hmm. right? Objectivity, it's funny. I talked to old journalists versus young journalists, and clearly they changed what they taught in journalism school right around the mid-2000s as far as objectivity is an ideal, fairness is a goal, right? So, if I see 2 people kicking an old person who did nothing wrong and one person saying, hey, maybe don't kick that old guy for no reason. As a journalist, it's important for me to say, number 1, 2 people kicked. Number 2, the old guy didn't do anything as far as I know. And number 3, there was a guy saying, stop doing that. What is not good would be for me to say, I talked for 10 minutes to the guys that were kicking the guy and also the guys telling them to stop. And here's what they both said mm-hmm. Without any sort of contextualizing or framing. Mm-hmm. It's data gathering is important. Lately I've been nerding out about data because data doesn't yell at me.
But okay, let's pause for a second here. Again, you're known as the guy that goes to the places where they're going to yell at you.
Yeah.
But you're also a human being, mm-hmm. so some of it's got to come through. And I'm not putting you on the spot because I think our second interview ever on this podcast was William from the Police, mm-hmm. who said that I yell at these people and basically everybody applauds what he does out there. Mm-hmm. But he says it's hard for him some nights to go to sleep because that's just hard emotionally on mm-hmm. you. Is it hard emotionally for you when you go out there?
With protests, regardless of the protest, here's the thing about protests, and this took me a while to internalize, but it really helps me get the very little sleep at night that I do get. Regardless of what someone's beliefs are, right? Be they... I believe that we should recycle more because some protests are about that, right? Or sometimes the protests are about this is a false belief, but sometimes people genuinely hold that Hillary Clinton and the rest of the Democrats, as well as trans people, are harvesting children for sexual gratification and organs. Look, we have to contextualize these beliefs when we write or when we film, right? That's important. But it is also important to understand that these are genuinely held beliefs, and I'm passionate about certain things.
You think they really do believe these things?
I think that there's a few cases where that's not true. So in the case of like the QAnon stuff, or some of the more extreme.
Well, for example,
Yeah.
you've had clashes with Proud Boys and people like Tony Moon, who, in fact, just the other day, or it might have been today, Andy Ngo. How do you say his last name?
I believe it's pronounced Nyo. Yeah.
No. Okay. Andy Ngo sent his people out on you. Andy says ridiculous things. Do you think he's being sincere?
I'm unaware of Andy Ngo's.
All right, fine. So
posting.
the Proud
No,
Boys.
I could look at it. I just.
Well, here's my problem.
Yeah.
I don't believe them most of the time.
Okay.
I think they know better than
Well,
this.
I think it's also, I think you have to separate the Andy Ngo's of the world from the people who are on the street, right? Andy Ngo has not attended any of these things in a very long time, as far as we can tell. So we can talk about sort of the misinformation, disinformation in a second. But as far as the people who are like screaming in front of a school, screaming at trans people, screaming at politicians, we all have our opinions on who's right, who's wrong. I certainly, I don't think anyone would be surprised by my opinions on all of that. I think that's not surprising. But, at the end of the day, my job, and I haven't always been perfect at this for sure, and I think people oftentimes who are not covering protests as often as I do don't quite understand that, like, hey, like, you're a human being, and, when you're getting kicked, punched, shoved, screamed at every single day, there does come a time where you have to be like, hey, man, don't do that. You know what I mean? Like, please stop. I'm not an action figure. You know what I mean? But, as far as I think you're alluding to sort of the Glendale protests and the Saticoy Elementary protest more specifically.
Yeah. I mean, do they really... They know that drag queens don't turn people gay, right?
Look, I'm not in their head 24/7. I think I have a few responses to that. Number one, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but I grew up mostly in like Northwest and South Side of Milwaukee.
Oh, did ya?
Yeah. That's why I'm electing to ignore that Cubs hat.
Fair enough.
Yeah. It's if this were back home, this would be a whole thing. Being from Milwaukee, growing up, I think I'm older than I think people think I am sometimes. I'm 36, so I witnessed a lot of changes in how America, especially like places in the Midwest, relate to LGBT issues. I mean, Milwaukee is Milwaukee. It's not the same as the rest of Wisconsin.
Right.
The homophobia certainly carried over when I was growing up. But, I remember Matthew Shepard, right? That was in the mid-'90s. He was a gay man who was brutally beaten and murdered. His corpse was left basically desecrated, and that got a lot of news. It also ended with a fairly well-known play. That caused a lot of, I think, specifically white moms who had previously not, we're speaking generally here, been sympathetic to gay issues. I think it caused a lot of them to realize that could be my son. I grew up with the F slur constantly being thrown out. Tony, I think are you Gen X or elder millennial?
I'm Gen X.
You're Gen X? Okay. So I'm an elder millennial, so there's a lot of language that we both grew up with that
Sure.
like
Yeah.
I think back, and I go, oh my God, like, and language changes, right? And generally speaking, language changes organically. I am lucky enough to have grown up around a few gay folks. Didn't turn gay. I actually turned like I love professional wrestling, basketball, and fishing. Like
Just what these guys wanted you to be.
Yeah, exactly.
You're wearing a flannel. You got.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna say
you
I'm
got
wearing
normal
like flannel.
sneakers on and jeans.
Mm-hmm.
You're exactly what the Midwest wants their boys to turn into.
Yeah, and I think growing up,
You came over with a bottle of whiskey.
Yeah, heck yeah, man.
I mean, same over here. And yet, when I was 12 or 13, back then it was called the Gay Parade, the San Francisco Gay Parade. And on Saturday, it was mostly gay. On Sunday, it was dykes on bikes.
Yeah.
It didn't turn me the slightest bit gay.
It did make me go, I like motorcycles. I don't know what that says.
You are in the Pico-Robertson area.
I was in the Pico-Robertson area until yesterday. No, I was in the Pico-Union area until yesterday. I am now in the Pico-Robertson area, so hopefully when people are listening to this, I will have everything unpacked.
Tell me about Pico-Union.
So Pico-Union is actually like one of the most interesting, challenging, amazing neighborhoods in all of Los Angeles. I think everybody who's ever been to Pico-Union can agree, like, it's this huge area and no one ever talks about it. And there's all these cool things about it. It has this amazing history.
This is what this podcast is for.
Yeah.
When people go to Pico-Union and don't know that they're there,
Yeah.
what are they mostly going there for?
So there's a couple things you can go for. If you are just going to relax and go there, number one, please, 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 in Pico-Union, please go to the small bakeries and the small taquerias and the small liquor stores. Please don't go to the CVS. Please don't go to the Walgreens. It's a neighborhood that does, frankly, not have as much of a cash influx as others. I have spent most of my life being the guy who is in a neighborhood where I have to be very conscious of where I'm spending my money.
Good man. You're a hippie, man.
I'm
Just
a hippie,
own
and
it.
I think that there's a responsibility to, when you're in some ways a guest to a neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
There's a responsibility to make sure that that's where your money is going.
This area, according to the LA Times, is south of MacArthur Park, and it ends. Its southernmost part is the 10 freeway. So basically, on your way to USC. You wouldn't say that?
Yeah, sure. I think, I would agree generally with that. I mean, we could talk about like the Westlake MacArthur Park area as sort of, they're both sort of an extension of each other, but I haven't agreed with everything on that LA Times neighborhood chart,
which is interesting. We don't either.
Yeah.
But they're the standard. This thing is the standard, and maybe with your data, one day the LA Times will pick you up, and you can improve on this. I mean, it is kind of old, but notable people from your neighborhood: Jim Jones, the founder and leader of the People's Temple.
There you go.
Larry Elder, who's almost your governor.
Well, I mean, we talked about data. I think.
He wasn't anywhere close to being your governor, was he?
No, I used to be really obsessed with. I think this will surprise people, but I'm kind of a data nerd. I used to be really obsessed with election math and things like that, which is why some of the people you've brought up on, you would laugh if you saw me watching it, because like when with Kathleen was a guest. Like, she was talking about election math, and I was literally like on the edge of my seat, like I'm watching professional wrestling. Like, what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
Election math is important. And the reality is in California, a candidate like Larry Elder just wasn't. It just wasn't going to happen.
No.
I think that there's an argument. I don't feel comfortable saying yes or no, but I've heard this argument a lot from people that are smarter than me, which is most people, that he probably got better numbers than he would have in a normal election and still lost by a significant amount.
Oh, yeah. Landslide. Mm-hmm. Wasn't even close. Nor should it have been. The man's not experienced. He was saying crazy things. He was saying that minimum wage should be at $0. But come on. In all of California, that's the best that the GOP had. Let's go back real quick to Pico-Union.
Yeah.
Fine, I won't eat at the McDonald's.
Please don't.
Anymore. Mm-hmm. Where should I eat?
There is a really lovely Salvadorian restaurant. I first discovered it because I'm a big Wu-Tang fan. It's called El Tikal. And they serve, mostly like really simple, Salvadorian food. But they also, and this is really important for when I have a day off, which is very, very rare, they actually have La Bohemia, which is my favorite Mexican lager. And it's actually hard to find outside of places like Pico-Union because most people think of Mexican beer as, your Corona, we're in Southern California, so mostly Modelo here. Mm-hmm. And they're just lovely people. Everything has just
I don't know anything about Salvadorian food.
Okay.
What should I order to eat?
The most important staple thing of if you're going to go to a restaurant and you want great food. I feel like such a silly person describing El Salvadorian food. But hey,
what do you mean? You're from Milwaukee.
I am a chef, so I'll do my best. But you really want to start with pupusas.
Okay.
If you like quesadillas, and if you don't like quesadillas, then I don't really want to talk to you. I don't.
Well, we feel bad for you.
It's the perfect food. It's cheese and like the tiniest little bit of other thing. Like what cheese is delicious.
Perfect food for a Wisconsin
Exactly.
person.
Exactly. So it's essentially to translate. I don't know who listens, but I think I know who to translate for. Think of like a puffed up quesadilla.
Okay.
Oftentimes with an ingredient. Usually, if you go to a great one, they'll have at least 10 different options of things to put in a pupusa. Mm-hmm. Heavily suggest grabbing squash blossom.
Oh.
Very, very good. And hey, if you're vegetarian, that'll work.
Yeah.
It's usually served with like a light slaw, like almost like a cabbage slaw, which has just like a little bit of piquant, and usually some kind of like slightly spicier sauce, which sometimes is like almost like a salsa rojo, but other times can be a little bit more kind of tomatoey, a little bit more sort of ancho or not ancho, but like ancho, where you have a little bit more of that kind of spicy, toasty, almost smoky flavor.
You are giving away what you do for a living.
Yes.
According to your LinkedIn, mm-hmm. You can never trust anything on the internet these days.
It's true.
It says that you were a sommelier.
Mm-hmm. I still am.
And a champagne expert.
Yes.
Have you been to the Champagne region of France?
I have been to the Champagne region of France many times.
Ooh la la! Do you parlez-vous?
Very, very little. Very, very little.
And they didn't care?
They don't care. So in France, particularly in Champagne, everyone speaks English. As you go further south, you are going to see a little bit less people that speak English. I love the French. Oftentimes they do speak English, even if they pretend not to. It's a bit
you just gotta poke them.
But yeah, in Champagne, everyone speaks English. It is One of the most beautiful places in Europe. It's not as beautiful as Campania in Italy, which is my favorite place in the entire world. But it's what's really glorious about it is I love unique places, and you do this podcast, so you love unique places. What's really unique about Champagne is, first of all, it's so far north that grapes don't actually grow naturally there. They had to be brought there. It seems as though the Romans did that. So, because
the Romans didn't want to go south, or they didn't have a train line, or
yeah, they didn't quite get the train built for another couple thousand years. But so when the Romans were conquering Europe, eventually, the Romans were notorious for wanting to get hammered, which there
wasn't the internet.
Forcefully conquering the known world. I'd assume you'd need to get toasty every once in a while.
That's right.
To either not think about what you had to do, or at least because it's a lot of work. So what they did was, as they went north, they were planting grapes with them, because that's part of the sort of Roman identity. And what they did was, as they got into Champagne, there's these really interesting, unique chalk-based soils. It's part of what's called the Kimmeridgian Ridge in northern Europe, and it makes for a very, very unique grape growing process, because the grapes that grow there don't get a whole lot of sun. They don't get to mature quite as much as, say, the Napa Valley in California. So you have these very, very acidic grapes. So eventually someone got around to, and by someone I actually mean specifically a few churchgoers, Damprignon, Dambrunart. All those were real people at one point.
I never knew.
Yeah. So and then the Madame Clicquot, Veuve Clicquot, the widow, eventually sort of helped along this process. But someone got around in roughly the late 1700s to realizing, hey, this wine needs a little something, right? So they decided to intentionally make sparkling wine, which was a new process. Sparkling wine often happened accidentally. And that's how Champagne became a thing.
How about that? This is why I love this podcast. Even though we're talking about Pico-Union, Pico Robertson, you end up wandering off into 18th century France.
So yeah, Champagne is my favorite beverage.
When did that first happen? When did it dawn on you that you loved this?
That I loved wine and champagne?
Champagne. Because it's not a Wisconsin thing, I wouldn't think.
It isn't, but drinking is.
That is true.
Drinking is very much a Wisconsin thing. Some would argue too much of a Wisconsin thing.
Well, who would do that? Paul Ryan, God, shut your mouth.
The health department of Wisconsin, of the state of Wisconsin, would probably argue that. But I always, I love beer too. I can get down with some beer. Don't get me wrong. Like, one of my tastiest, most beloved beverages of all time is a High Life with a little bit of Campari in it. It's called a spaghetti, and I love it. It's not the most classy beverage that I drink, but at the end of a hard day, it works out. But I've always been a nerd. I talked about data and things like that. I like to know stuff. I know that seems like a silly thing, but I'm like overly curious oftentimes. And eventually, I started managing restaurants. I worked for actually a few like very big deal restaurants at a very young age. I'm actually very lucky. It kind of brought me out of some not great situations when I was a kid. And eventually a sommelier who was working at a very famous restaurant, he'll kill me if I say which one, but he let me do work for him for free in the wine cellar. Which now that I'm much older, I realized that I was kind of getting exploited there. But I'm glad it happened because, as part of letting him work for free, he would let me taste the wines. And when you are a 21 year old kid, and you're being given, $100, $200, $300 bottles of wine to taste, that's going to interest you. It's going to pique your interest, especially when you're, a kid from
let's keep talking about wine real quick. We live so close to Santa Barbara,
We do.
where I went to school. Have you done the Sideways tour? Have you? Do you love living so close to Santa Barbara?
I do love living close to Santa Barbara. I haven't done the Sideways tour, but Santa Barbara is, I think, the most interesting wine growing region in the United States. It's certainly one of the most diverse. As you get closer to the coast, over in Santa Maria, you have Chardonnay, you have Pinot Noir, and you have vineyards who are producing it in very different, who are making grapes in very different ways. You have all these really cool wineries that are like tiny. It's like two guys, doing what they want to do, and all of them are doing things slightly differently, and all of them like love the soil, love what they're producing. As you go inland towards Los Olivos, you have Syrah being produced in large quantities. You have Grenache, so you have like kind of a Rhone type of situation where it's a little bit sunnier, and you also have, what's really unique about Santa Barbara is you have these tiny little pockets of not just, the big couple, but you also have little pockets of things like Blaufränkisch, which is an Austrian grape, and you have Mission all over kind of the Central Coast, which has like its own podcast, but it's very important to the development of not just wine in the United States, but it's very important in the story of how we all got here. And wine is culture, right? As human beings started to stay in one place, almost exactly at that exact same time, we have archaeological evidence that people were fermenting fruits. So,
because they could. If we were wandering,
yeah,
you can't really do much of that.
There's that. There's also, I would argue, if you're having a nice glass of, at the time, what was, wine, beer, mead, it was kind of a combination of all three a lot of the time. You're a lot less like, it's who you want to sit down for a minute. You want to enjoy it, right?
There's a winery downtown.
Yes.
Have you had their wine?
There's actually, if I can let you in on a little secret, there are several wineries who are sourcing from downtown.
Is downtown a good place to grow wine?
Well, believe it or not, Los Angeles started very much once the missions arrived here. Los Angeles was known as being one of the major producers of wine in the United States.
What year are we talking?
We're talking late 1800s, early 1900s. So San Antonio Winery, first of all, even if you don't like wine, it's actually a pretty dope tour. I'm not going to lie to you. It's pretty cool. So San Antonio Winery has a long history of being there. Believe it or not, Men's Central Jail used to be a vineyard. In fact, that entire area used to be vineyards. And I'm not going to say exactly where because I've got a little project going.
So when they tear it down, maybe we can bring it back?
Maybe. Who knows? I mean, it would be pretty... I mean, listen... Italy, France, and Germany all have, cooperatives that are partially owned by this. By maybe we can have an LA wine. We have wines made in LA. There's Byron Blatty, who sources mostly from Rancho Cucamonga area. There's Los Angeles River Project, which sources from all over. There's also Moraga, which is owned by the former owner of Fox News in Bel Air.
What?
Yeah, there's a bunch of vineyards there.
So, okay. Again, I don't know anything about it, anything really.
Yeah.
I just thought, because I've been to Napa, and when I lived up there, I would install satellite dishes in people's houses.
Okay.
And once I did it at a vineyard. And instead of a cash dollar tip, they're like, want a case of wine?
Yeah.
Why, yes, I do. Napa doesn't look like downtown LA.
It doesn't. There's several differences.
But I guess maybe the grapes don't know that.
Oh, they do. So here's the thing. In downtown Los Angeles, you have a few things going on that are pretty unique climatically from, say, Napa or like Santa Maria. Number one, you have a great deal more sunlight in Los Angeles. Not so much this year, but generally speaking, you have about 320 days of sunlight every single year. Number two, you have a lot less sunlight cover, right? And number three, the soil, depending on where you are in Napa, generally speaking, going to be a little bit rockier, but not necessarily, right?
Are these good or bad things? Do I want sun?
Yeah, so it depends. So, for instance, Pinot Noir is a very thin-skinned grape, very light color. I think we've all seen a glass of Pinot Noir, right? You can almost see through it. That doesn't do great with a lot of sun. But you also have grapes like Tannat or Syrah, which do very, very well. They have thicker skins. They have darker skins. They've adapted to their environment over hundreds and hundreds of years, and then they were brought here. So a lot of it's a question of what grape belongs here. I'll let you in on a little secret. There are grapes growing on vines all over Los Angeles. Many of those vines are very, very old. They tend to be Missions, Zinfandel, Cinsault, Carignan, all of these grapes that are like specifically like for hot weather climates. There's a few producers who are making really cool wines out of them. Centralas makes a wine out of Rancho Cucamonga that's made mostly Carignan. It's really cool, and it's this thing where I hope that the right people get turned on to this. I have a fear. There's one gentleman who's making wine here who changed the name of the grape Mission, or Mission, depending who you ask, into País. It is the same genetic grape. País exists in Chile and is a little bit more highly regarded. Mission is sort of viewed as like, oh, this used to be what people planted. So we're already starting to see some linguistic gentrification.
Interesting.
And there's even some vines, if you look real closely near what used to be called Junipero Serra Park. There's even some vines that are very obviously growing. Ironically enough, I'm trying to get enough grapes to make wine out of downtown Los Angeles. The only reason I think I might have found enough of these vines is because I spent a few years ducking through various little spots and all that. So I've learned the plant topography.
Let's wrap up the wine chat with something up my alley.
Yeah.
$2 Chuck.
Okay.
I worked with a guy at KPCC, Matthew DeBoard, who was also a wine expert, and you guys would actually be best friends. He told me that $2 Chuck is fine, and that you can make a profit off of it, and this should be a bigger deal. But people, I guess, get greedy and turn it into jugs of wine for $7. What's your take about all that?
Without getting too in the weeds, so there's a few things that are going on. One, in order to make expensive wine, you need to make cheap wine for a few years. Vines, when you put them in the ground, don't really give you any fruit that's worth harvesting in any real way for at least 5 years. And generally speaking, depending on the vine, 10 to 15 years is where you start to make wine that you can sell for a lot of money. Whatever a lot of money is to you. So what do you do with all the juice before that, right? You sell it as bulk, so you get some compensation. There's also sometimes something goes wrong in the vineyard enough, or wrong in the winemaking operation enough, to where you don't necessarily want to put your name on it, but it's fine, right? Let me give you an example, right? If you're selling a wine, say your wine retails for $80,
Okay.
right? If something goes even a little bit wrong, can you sell it for $80? I don't know about you, but $80 is a lot of money for a tasty beverage for me. So
Sure is.
I would be less likely. I would be a little offended if I paid $80 and there was something, slightly off. Now, if you paid $2 for that wine, you're fine, right? It's great. It'll get you drunk.
Yeah.
You know what? I still, to this day, occasionally drink some Franzia. I love it. It's a little bit sugary. It's my mom used to call it the chapless, which is, I think, how they want you to pronounce it. The region is called Chablis. It's not from there.
Yeah.
But it's if people are enjoying what they're drinking and having fun, that's what's important, right? I worked I worked for a very famous chef. There's literally a documentary about how mean he was, right? One day he screamed at me for, and I'm not exaggerating, an hour. Wow. And I'm pretty good at, just listening and things like that. But there does come a point, and we're all humans, there does come a point where you are going to give it back, And actually I think it's important to do that. I've seen out in the field, reporters are, and this is protests nationwide, reporters are hit, beaten, sexually harassed, particularly female reporters, stalked. It's not safe. And, it's one of my frustrations oftentimes with policing when you're covering protests, and I know a lot of journalists share this frustration, is you're worried about what's going on behind you, to the right of you, to the left of you, and what's in your camera all at the same time. You've got this guy going over there, you've got this guy going over there, you've got rocks coming over your head, and I'm often in the middle. So it's funny when officers will say, like, I got pelted in the head with a rock or a piece of water or whatever like that. And I'm like, yeah, man, I was literally in the middle of that. I got pelted by way more than you did. Like, you can't complain to me. Like, I'm sorry you got hit too. That sucks.
Do you wear a helmet out there?
I always, this is important actually. You always want to dress correctly for the occasion, right? And you don't always know what the occasion is. I always elect to overdress. So my equipment goes somewhere between jeans and a t-shirt and my camera phone and some sunglasses to level 3A body armor, Kevlar sleeves. I never do anything that's illegal. Occasionally I've had pepper spray in my pocket when I'm in a jurisdiction where that's allowed. Helmet, visor. So it's, whatever I think the night's going to be, that's what I prepare for.
Do you have any signage that says press?
Yes. So I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think it should be necessary to have like press written all over you or anything like that. But generally speaking, 99.5% of the time, I wear a press pass. There's been a few occasions where it's like, I mean, particularly early on during the BLM movement, there were so many things going on that there would be times where I'd be driving home from a protest and be like, oh, there's another protest. I'll go check it out.
Who issued your press pass?
NPAA has issued me a press pass.
Who's that?
National Photographers Association. Sorry, NPPA. I've got one from, Knock LA has given me one.
Is that a sheriff's one, or is that
is not a sheriff's one?
That's a Knock LA one.
I like many photographers, videographers, and journalists, will not pay money to the organization that I am covering in order to cover that organization. I think that that's basic ethical 101 shit.
Also,
can I swear on this, Brian?
Well, I'm about to.
All right.
Who the fuck are they to give us press passes?
Right. Well, and it also bears mentioning that as far as LAPD is concerned, and they occasionally either forget this or refuse to follow their own policy, they have stated many times over that you do not need to have an issued press pass to be considered a duly appointed member of the press.
Great. And by the way, we didn't need them to say that anyways.
Right.
Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, it's one of those funny things where if somebody said, like, if you're standing outside of your house and someone walked past and went, "Hey, you're good standing there," you'd be like, "Yeah, I know." Like, you don't need to tell me that.
We both agree.
And there's this sort of funny thing where the police keep claiming that, oh, well, it's hard to figure out who's press and who's not, and it's like, well, cool. How about you only arrest people that are throwing stuff or whatever, committing a crime, right? I mean, and
Crazy
then
idea.
if you just, you don't need to know if somebody's pressed or not, then you could just arrest people who are committing the crimes that you're authorized to arrest people for. Honestly, the arrest in San Pedro was actually a bigger hassle for me, which was, I would argue, the most questionable arrest of me of all time. So, William Good was arrested there as well.
Was this the where the you
yeah,
with the crutches?
Yeah, that's me.
You were the one with the crutches that day?
Yeah.
Oh my god!
So I had torn my or not torn, but I had like strained an already torn ACL. And
what
so I was
a
on
small
crutches.
world.
So yeah, so the cops are telling everybody to go this way. They're trying to go that way, and my whole thing is I was like, hey, like, I'm trying to follow them, but I'm also like trying to say like, hey, like I would also like to have a separate conversation because it's not even the same conversation with me. You know what I mean? I'll go wherever, it's fine, but also like, hey, give me a minute, you know? But yeah, an LA sanitation worker told William and another activist and myself that we could hang out where we were hanging out. I had all my gear set up. And then suddenly an officer came by, told us we couldn't. To be honest with you, I was ready to kind of tell him, no, I can. By that time, William being William,
much shorter fuse than you and I.
Yeah. Well, I've been known to pop off every once in a while, but I'm pretty calm normally. But yeah, he's like, they told us, and then told us to go one way. Everyone started going that way. Told us to go the other way. Started going the other way. I'm on crutches, so I'm like, I'm lagging behind. Told everybody there was a minute, and then about 10 seconds later, arrested one of the activists.
Which is, it's so good it was on video.
Yeah, so you probably would have seen some combination of myself and Film the Police's filming.
And this guy's a training officer who's like, you've got a minute to get out of here.
Right.
And so you guys are trying to figure out, well, which way do you want me to go? And I think it's less than 10 seconds. He's like, forget it, you're arrested.
Yeah.
And partly it's because William was getting under his skin verbally, but you're a professional. You're supposed to, Kobe shoots the free throw when everybody's booing.
Right.
The cop can't wait a minute to see what you guys do before he handcuffs you.
Yeah, I guess not. I don't know.
So did you? Were you the one that shot the video of him getting arrested?
Yes, that is mine. So after I got arrested, it was so funny because they've got me like dangling in a car because I'm like, hey, like I can't move my leg, my guy. Like this is. They're at one point they were like, oh, we're gonna go to the police station, and I remember saying like, I don't think we're gonna go there, like because I had hit press. By that time, I had pressed tweet already. So before, like, I had filmed their arrest and then pressed tweet. So I was like, I don't think we're even gonna get to the station.
Good for you.
It wasn't like me challenging the officers. It was me literally as a statement of fact. Like, hey, like I don't think you understand what's going on here. Cited me,
and you say it because your belief was this tweet's going to go so viral that Film the Police is being arrested, and I've got video of him getting a minute warning, and in 10 seconds, therefore the cops are going to tell this training officer, knock it off, let these guys go.
My thought was this. That's sort of accurate. My thought was this: is I was thinking to myself, people have already seen a questionable arrest, at that point. It's going to be questioned. They're going to realize, wait a minute, he filmed a questionable arrest and then all of a sudden he's not answering his phone, because there are some, press agencies and some friends and things like that check up on me every once in a while. Because what I do is dangerous.
Yeah.
And I appreciate them for that. Some of them I wish worked harder than others, but I won't go into that today. And then, so then I got cited. They made me move to the other base. They made me move like what ultimately was like 10 feet away from where we were. 50 feet. But where they made us move, there was no sight line originally, but luckily I had a monopod and I just kind of turned it, like, just held it up really high.
Hey, you journalists, go move to where you can't see.
Right. Well, that's, I mean, any city operation. I mean, I know, what's often called a comprehensive cleanup isn't interesting to everybody, but, there's a lot of discussion about how we treat the unhoused in this community, especially at that particular location, which was, part of Buscaino's district.
Yeah.
A lot of discussion about it. And there's a lot of, even some of Buscaino's city councilman friends were like, this is fucked up, dude. Like, don't do this. So, so then what ended up happening was they originally told me they were going to charge me with 5611, which is funny because 5611 is a statute that a judge told the city of Los Angeles you couldn't charge people with.
And what is it?
Well, so what's funny is it's actually a series of statutes. The specific one that they charged me with stated, I believe it was a bulky item charge, which I took as a fat joke, and I'm not appreciative of it. But certain statutes in 5611 are, you're not allowed to charge. It's essentially interference with a government or city cleanup. And I was like, I'm not interfering. Like, I'm chilling, man. I'm over here. Like, don't. So then I had to call a bunch of lawyers. Eventually, one of them was able to get a hold of the city attorney, who was like, hey, that's not what we're actually charging them with. And the attorney working for me was like, yeah, that's probably smart because you're not allowed to. Then they told me that there would be a hearing, which is like this weird, unofficial little like gathering of lawyers and myself.
At the city attorney's house? Or
no, it was via phone call.
Because we're still COVID, right?
Yeah, so it was still COVID.
So just a phone call where everybody's like...
Yeah, and then they told me that if I didn't attend or, that they would charge me. And so I was like, all right, whatever. I guess I'll get on this hearing. And then, that's when I started, like, looking into it. And I was like, you can't charge me with this. Like, actually, like, and my lawyers, I'm sure, did work towards saying, like, are you sure you want to fight about this kind of thing? And about 12 hours before the hearing, they said, never mind.
So 12 hours. So Führer did do the right thing and contacted your lawyer.
Yeah.
You didn't have to go down to court.
No. I had to contact them because I was like, hey, like, just confirming that the hearing is going on, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. And then they were like, yeah, there's no hearing. Sorry about that. Good. Never mind. Yeah. Well, they didn't say sorry about that.
Right. Of course not.
No attorney will ever say the word sorry. That's just not a word you say in law, I'm told. Mm-hmm.
Let's go to Knock LA.
Yeah.
Because a lot of your pieces are in Knock LA. Mm-hmm. And I think they're best known for Cerise's pieces on the sheriffs.
Yeah.
You come in a strong number 2.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think John Peltz's work is really good.
Oh, John, too.
Yeah.
I love John.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I don't read Knock LA enough.
I will say this. John does work that even I would never in a million years want to get into, which is boring city politics.
Right.
You'll see, if you ever see me covering city politics, something has gone horribly wrong.
Wasn't he live tweeting the city hall meeting the other day?
Yeah, so me, John, there were so many people live tweeting that thing. I think I want to say I was live tweeting it. John was live tweeting it. I think Julia Wick
love Julia
was
Wick.
live tweeting. She is very talented.
Not for
not for Knock LA.
Right.
No.
Right.
I'm not sure who was doing it for Knock.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure
it's okay.
Yeah. Sure you could add it in later.
But again, kudos to Knock and to all you people who are live tweeting, or as us old people say, tweeting.
Yeah.
The events of City Hall, because it's not everybody has the local channel. Not everybody gives a crap. And Twitter to me is better than my cable TV now, because I follow the right people like you. And there's not any opinion in these tweets. They just say caller number 15 says KDL should resign.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, that's nice to see. And
but yeah, those live tweets are usually done by All Base All Day, which I always laugh because when that account was created, I don't think that they were expecting Karen Bass to run for office. It's a bassist.
Yes.
Yeah. But
okay. So, anyways, kudos to Knock because I feel like, and this very couch is where LAist in 2006 did a lot of its work, and now that LAist is not what it used to be, I think there's a huge void out there between the LA Times and just randos on Twitter. And I think that a smaller press like Knock is the perfect place for a little bit more punk rock journalists like yourself and John and Cerise who do things properly but with a little bit of an edge.
Yeah. Well, it's also, I always like to joke, like, we need to bring back... Newspapers have been getting smaller and smaller over the years, and some stories belong on page 19J, right? Like, that's where they belong, but they still belong in the paper.
Yes.
People still need to know that, and it's also...
And sometimes those are the best little stories.
Yeah, well, and it's also, I think what's important about what Knock does specifically is there's a much more sort of personal aspect to it. It's one thing to read about this weird little gondola, right? Which, like, I'll be honest with you, I don't have a strong opinion personally about the gondola because I don't follow the gondola enough. But these gondola protests, to the people who are protesting the gondola, right, it's a very personal issue.
For those who don't know, and the reason I'm cracking up is the plan is to take people from Union Station to Dodger Stadium, which we do need a solution for this. It's not easy. And this, where we're recording this, isn't that far. And so traffic is messed up. And if we could funnel a lot of people to Union Station and get their butts over to Dodger Stadium, that'd be great. Is the gondola the way to go? Who knows? But the neighbors who the gondola would pass over,
they're furious about it.
Do not want this.
They do not want it at all. And to them, it's a a potentially catastrophic event. Having thousands of people walking around for half the year, that's a lot of and so. Yeah. Most newspapers would write about sort of just the general debate about the gondola, but it's also important to really get into, like, this affects somebody's life, like, very fully. And it's also I think this is something I try to do with my Twitter account, again, 32J or whatever type of things, where it's like, to me, I find a guy who is driving around delivering ice cream and all the ice cream pours all over the street, I find that to be just as interesting a story. Does it affect as many people as the fallout from the Nuri Martinez and KDL tapes? No, but it's interesting, right?
Let's talk about KDL.
Oh boy,
I have taken it under my wing. Anytime that dude posts on Facebook, I'm going to tell him he needs to resign.
Okay.
Because nobody else is doing it.
I have noticed this. I think...
Now, they're doing it at City Hall.
Yeah.
But it seems to me, and I've never been to a City Hall meeting. I should one day.
I
shouldn't?
No, they're a trip. I am not generally a politics reporter. Like I said, things have to go pretty wrong for me to be involved in a city politics story, because I just, as a general rule, I think that what I do right now, mostly reporting on city politics, makes it a little weird.
Right.
But things got so weird that I ended up covering city politics for a little while. I remember calling my mom and being like, well, guess I'm going to be hanging around city politics for a little while, because a bunch of city hall or a bunch of city councilmen decided to say some very racist, occasionally anti-Semitic things.
Can we get into specifics?
Yeah.
So what I remember is he called Mike Bonin's adopted
Mike Bonin. Yeah.
Bonin's adopted 2-year-old black baby, compared him to a handbag.
Correct.
What else am I missing?
Well,
This was a leaked meeting that I guess somebody got the telephone line.
It's still unclear on exactly how that was recorded,
and nobody has figured out who leaked it. And I don't want to.
There's been lots of rumors, and I'm not going to lie. I'm waiting for someone to, without evidence, just say I did it. I didn't, but that'd be fun for a couple of days for people to think.
So anyway, this got out. Nuri resigned. She was the council president.
Nuri resigned within a few days.
Yeah, she didn't want to at first.
Of the release of the tape, yeah.
Right. And then the other guy, Gil...
Cedillo.
He seemed like just a grumpy dude in general. And so he grumpily just petered off because he...
Well, he had already lost by the time...
He lost his election.
Yeah, so he had lost his election.
And then Kevin...
Just hanging out. Yeah, just hanging out. His defense has been pretty bizarre. He's that numerous times sort of denied that what he said was hurtful in any way, denied that what he said was racist. Said, well, I should have, the real problem is I should have left. Well, no, what you said was the problem too. And also,
and Bonin called him a racist after.
He did. There's a lot going on with this, right? So first of all, you have, several city council members effectively bullying an outgoing other city council member. You have really concerning racist and homophobic language directed not just at a city council member, but their child. You have another element, which is a little bit harder to get into the weeds on, but you also have effectively a bunch of city council members discussing, or at least hinting at discussing, actively taking power away from an already disenfranchised group in order to empower themselves. I think the bullying part and the disenfranchisement part have both sort of been forgotten
because they wanted to redo the map so that black people would have less power.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, that's a simplification, but I think an accurate one. Yeah. So after that, people were, understandably angry. And then, the protests, they still exist. They're not like what they were. The city council meeting directly after that was, I can't stress enough, one of the most bizarre things I've ever covered. So you have a lot of, anti-racist groups there. You have a lot of sort of pro-union, particularly Oaxacan community groups. You have groups like Black Lives Matter LA.
The Hawkins, because somehow they caught some stray bullets off of this conversation too.
So in the discussion they were made fun of as well.
Yeah.
And you also had sort of a bizarre group of people that were like defending specifically Kevin De Leon, because Nuri had resigned shortly before the meeting. Cedillo, people just kind of were like, he's gone in a month anyway. So that group was, and I want to be really careful about how I say this because it's really important. There's a lot of context here. So that group was people who primarily worked very closely with Kevin De Leon, largely in the nonprofit sector. People who effectively his office had rewarded with contracts and things like that. And also sort of an offshoot who I can't stress enough are not affiliated with Most of the Brown Berets you see, this is a offshoot. I'm not speaking about specifically the Brown Berets, but this specific offshoot, who again had been kicked out and had spent most of their time in the last few years attempting to hijack protests and starting their own 5G protests, and really some bizarre stuff. And those were the people that were out there for KDL. So
And in the bigger picture of things, both Nuri and KDL were kind of the future of Latino democratic politics.
Absolutely.
in LA, if not
Yeah.
California.
Well, I think specifically, I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, KDL has been, this is how the Democratic Party works, had been viewed as a rising star for almost 20 years.
Right.
I mean...
And he just couldn't turn the corner. He couldn't make it to mass popularity for whatever reason. And
part of that was he had a history of not waiting his turn. And when I say not waiting his turn, I don't mean from my perspective. I mean, going against some heavy hitters in the Democratic Party and things like that. So he had always had trouble getting mainstream Democratic support. But he was starting to turn that corner. I mean, Nuri Martinez is probably the most powerful person in Los Angeles politics, including the mayor. And
she blew it.
Yeah. I have two cats. One I got in a bar in Milwaukee. This woman came into my neighborhood bar and was like, "Can anyone take this cat?" And my wife at the time was like, "We will." And then I remember being like, "I guess I have a cat now."
What's the cat's name?
His name is Copernicus. It's funny because I was not super on board with taking him, but within like 20 minutes of us getting home, he knew who to impress.
So before or after Copernicus that you made your Twitter handle?
Oh, way after. So I it actually came from when I first started going out to document things was like right during the first of the George Floyd solidarity protests. Being someone who has attended and even filmed protests before, real big fan of having facial coverage because it was already pretty obvious when George Floyd was murdered that there were going to be a lot of people out, and that anytime you have thousands of people out on the street and they're all passionate, you're going to have people who might be dangerous. You know what I mean? Might be
absolutely.
Police.
Well, they're wearing military outfits.
Yeah,
they're carrying swastikas. Like they're not there to kiss you.
Right. Well, I mean, I've never seen what I mean by that is especially in the first few days. So I had that balaclava just because it's nice to have. Balaclava is actually really useful as a safety tool, believe it or not. I don't wear them anymore because I realized like it does sort of make things weird. But it was a little kitty cat balaclava that I just happened to have from a Halloween costume, and then I just changed my name, and then now I've gotten to the point where I feel like I'm stuck with this stupid Twitter handle.
I think it's great.
It's kind of gotten to the point where I've felt so stuck with it that I think it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Particularly like there's a few January 6th documents, and it's just really funny to me to see, them like taking little Twitter captions and things like that. Oh. And it's really funny to see like a cat with news, like in a federal indictment of a Capitol rioter. It's really funny. I think often about this. So do you remember the We Spa protests?
Of course.
Those were some of the gnarliest protests I've ever seen.
Were you there? Did you get hit by one of those bottles?
I don't think I got hit by any bottles at that one.
Because I'm thinking about the corner.
Yeah.
Where the cops were, I think the cops were on both sides of that
Yeah,
intersection.
so basically, okay, I know which day and position you're talking about. So what you're describing was, there's this Korean spa which a person who has a penis, who states they're a transgender woman, had attended. Someone saw their penis.
That's what everyone says. Do you believe that's true? Did the trans person say that this was true?
Yeah, I think that their penis was probably seen. To me, it's like,
Well, spas
this is why this book is so important, because it's important to know that some women have penises.
Yes.
If they had known that, then they would have maybe been fine. I am someone who I try to stay out of too much culture war stuff.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's important to know that, trans people exist and some women have penises. And look, I grew up not knowing that. That was a bit of a surprise to me when I first found it out.
But we adjusted pretty quickly, didn't we?
But hey, you know what? I think about, my second cousin. I got to explain LGBT issues. We don't have anyone gay in my family, as far as I'm aware. So I was I'm always sort of elected to explain complex things to the kids.
But there's a lot of things that as we get older we learn.
Yeah, but here's the thing: when you're 9, she goes, "Hey, how come little Stevie has a mommy and a mommy?" And I remember being like, "Because some people have 2 mommies." And she was like, "Oh, dope." And then she went right back to playing with her Legos. So it's not, you got to get them early. Yeah. But anyway, so both sides are incredibly mad at each other. The previous one, some people had been stabbed. All sorts of people were hit in the face with all sorts of things, including a skateboard. There was blood. It was rough.
And lots of video on this.
Lots of video. It was like the Super Bowl for independent journalists. But I'll never forget this again. The reasonably held thing. So the Proud Boy / anti-pride, anti-trans / some of them were just mad about the Wii Spa thing, I think. Not many of them.
A spa they'd never been to.
Yeah, a spa, and that's an expensive spa. Let me tell you, there's reasons to protest that spa. Like, those prices
it more than
are
like
nuts.
$50?
Oh, it's way more.
Oh,
but you get to stay the whole day.
Yeah, I saw a video of a person who did 23 hours there.
Yeah, no, I actually, it was funny after these protests. I remember both times texting a journalist buddy of mine, and I'm like, well, the worst part of covering all this is like, now I need a spa day, and I can't even go. But so there's, these sides are both people, nominally protecting Wii Spa or pro-trans, however you want to categorize them, in anti-trans / there were members of multiple violent hate groups there and all sorts of things. Both sides were very clear about the fact that they were there to bash the other one. You know what I mean? I mean, and that's, regardless of your opinions, you need to know that going in, right? So I'll never forget this. This lady comes up to me, and we're waiting for both sides essentially to be in the same location. The anti-trans folks are like literally on their way. This lady comes up to me and she's like, "Hey, can I borrow you for a minute?" And I'm like, I always want to be nice. I'm actually a nice guy, so I'm like, "Hey, like, I'm kind of busy right now, but like, what's up?" She goes, "Well, I'm a professional mediator, and I was wondering if you could tell me who's leading both groups." And let me tell you something. That's the only time as a journalist I have ever been like, "Lady, you got to get the hell out of here. Like, you have no idea what you're in for." Like, these groups are about to bash each other's heads in. This is not a situation where, like, Mr. Stevenson and Mr. Johnson are arguing over who gets the corner office. Like, This is not one of those. Like, it's not going to help. Anyway, she left mad, and then like 20 minutes later, I saw her running away from Proud Boys.
Let's wrap up with this. People should be following you on Twitter.
Yes, please.
People should be reading you on Knock LA.
Knock LA, LCRW.
What's LCRW?
So I write it's called Left Coast Right Watch. So it's basically documenting things like hate groups, right-wing grifters, everything you can imagine. I did a lot of work on sort of the anti-abortion groups. for both NOC and LCRW, and how they interact and how there's a lot of money with those groups. So LCRW is also great. You can also see me on NOC LA.
Do you have a TikTok, a Facebook, an Instagram?
Don't have a TikTok, Instagram, same social media handles. A Cat with News.
Well, I want to say thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you for what you do. I love hearing about different neighborhoods.
Well, good. But what I do is not dangerous. And what I do doesn't involve a lot of travel. You came to meet today, which was great. You came early. You came with a gift.
Say it's not dangerous, but you're using the LA Times neighborhood map, so
That's true. and I mean, but you are literally in front of people who are there to fight.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, ideally I'm on the side, but yeah.
Right. Do you see yourself doing this in 5-10 years?
In 5 to 10 years, I hope no loved ones are watching this because they will absolutely yell at me for saying this. But one of the things that I am becoming really interested in is the way that war affects people and the way that war changes people and things like that. So I'm also very, very interested in, like more localized issues. What I'm realizing is I think there's a great need in a lot of places for people who are stupid enough to go there. And I promise you, if any editor is watching, I am stupid enough to go there. You name the place, I will go there.
Do you follow any of these YouTubers that intentionally go to dangerous places?
I do. I think what I do is stupid. I think that in order to properly document wars and things like that, I do think that you need to take more steps than a lot of them do. And I think that I don't think you need a fixer necessarily. In fact, I'm pitching a thing where I intentionally don't necessarily have a fixer. But you do need to be a little bit more tuned into where you're dropping yourself and things like that.
So if you could right now, would you go to Ukraine? And
I would go to the Ukraine. I would go to Yemen. I would go to Syria. Wherever there's money to be had, I'll go. As long as it's enough to buy some cigarettes and put my cats up in a hotel.
So you're a mercenary for journalism.
I would like ideally to be, look, I'm getting older. I would like to be, paid every week. That'd be nice, or every other week even.
What did they used to call this back in the olden days when there's budgets?
Stringers.
No. They like an international a foreign correspondent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's what you want to be, as a foreign correspondent.
That's one thing. I love covering protests and covering movements and things like that.
But again, it would be a foreign correspondent to a scene where you don't want to send your Annenberg intern.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to know how to handle themselves. Are there people on YouTube right now that you watch that you admire? Are there names that you have?
There's a few. I really like. It's called Step Back. Okay. He is a historian. He definitely has a leftist point of view. He did a great deal of documenting sort of and tracing the far right in the United States and Canada. That's another thing I would, if SBLC is listening, I will also work for you. But so they're great. I really, unfortunately, YouTube, a lot of folks that cover protests and things like that, it's gotten sort of wrapped up in a lot of like what I would call like the debate bro culture, which I don't think it's healthy to toxically, yell at each other. It's for the same reason I don't want to watch Stephen A. Smith anymore. Like,
right.
There's enough yelling in my life. I don't need to see more of it.
Especially that early in the morning.
Yeah.
Mamma mia.
Other YouTube channels.
I'm thinking about guys like Bald, the world traveler Bald guy. He like learned Russian because he's just so interested in the Soviet Union, and he would go places you're not supposed to go.
Yeah.
And shoot video, and once in a while get arrested. But those soldiers are so poor, he just has a pocket full of money and just gives it to them. Okay. That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
But But they're using these tiny little Sony cameras that I guess are good with batteries, and they get to take you places that for some reason the quote unquote real media isn't going to. Yeah. Which is heartbreaking to me because I love journalism so much. And even though I came up as a blogger, I'm not crazy about citizen journalism for the most part, which I bet you a lot of people call you.
I think, honestly, there was a time where I was okay calling myself that. I think labels are helpful in some ways. I think giving yourself a label is only limiting yourself. You know what I mean? So,
but what I'm saying though is I'm warming to it. Yeah. Because if these billionaires are going to buy these news organizations and then crumble them and dilute them. I mean, there was a time where we used to have a weekly newspaper here that was pretty punk rock, and that's gone. And so if there's all these voids, something's going to fill it. So if it's a cat with news, fuck yeah.
Yeah, I mean, more to come. Wish I could tell you more, but I'll let you know when it's time.
So nice meeting you.
You too.
Thanks for coming.
All right, thanks again.
How great was Sean? You know who we'd have a sip of Santa Barbara Merlot with? Our Patreons. When you stoke us, you're saying, Tony, Jordan, thanks for letting us hear from a cat with news. Take all of our money. So shout out to our Patreons, Nancy Rommelman, Sean Atlow, Matt Mills, Sean Wallace, Greg and Molly, Jamie Taylor, Mark Johnson, Kira Ann, Barney Grinke, Ben Welsh, Jen Adams, Trevor Wilson, Bree Wild, Dougie Gyro, Christina Up North, Robin Carey, Adam Shorn, Ben from Down Under, Chris from the ATX, and Gregor. To be a Patreon, just go to patreon.com/here in LA and give till it hurts. Also, shout out to our Angelinos. To be an Angelino, all you got to do is PayPal or Venmo $25 or more, and we will list you on the Here in LA website or Medium blog forever. And catch this, people, because this is episode number 99, something that we may stop doing very soon is having Angelinos. So, this might be your last chance to be an Angelino and have your name listed on that blog or website, whatever happens, forever. So, shout out to our newest and maybe last Angelino, Sean Atlow. Merci beaucoup. Just send your hard-earned cash to busblog@gmail.com if you want to be on that list. Want to support us, but you just paid so much money to take a family of four to that Marvel movie in IMAX? You can still help. Post your favorite episode on your Facebook, OMG Post 2. Tweet something nice about this, and anytime you see me tweet about an episode, retweet it. Just beep. I think that's the sound of doves crying. Beep. And for God's sake, tell your friends. Tell your friends how Here in LA is spelled, and that it's on Apple Podcasts and Google and Spotify and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Oh my God, it's on everything. Instagram stories. It's in your dreams, people. Here in LA sometimes is in your dreams. Here in LA is produced by myself, Tony Pierce, and a man who is a banjo sommelier, Jordan Katz. Editing, mixing, and music supervision by Jordan Katz. Songs by Orgone and Jordan Katz. Special thanks to Cindy for creating the logo, Jen for inspiring this, and people everywhere doing their best to make the world a better place. Merci beaucoup, Patriots!